Welcome to India and the United States, the Trump Factor. Thank you for coming here on such a short notice because we just organized this event a couple of days ago. It's a great pleasure to welcome Professor Harsh Pant here. It's really an honor to have him. Harsh really doesn't need an introduction, but in brief, he's Vice President of the Observer Research Foundation, responsible for studies and foreign policy. He's also Professor of International Affairs at King's College London's India Institute. And also he's the Honorary Director of the Delhi School of Transnational Affairs at Delhi University. By the way, Harsh also used to be, I had the great fortune of having Harsh as my supervisor, PhD supervisor at King's years ago. So I have learned a lot from him and continue to learn from him to this day. So with this brief introduction, we're going to discuss the Trump factor in the India-US relations. And of course, you have all read what has happened in the last 2 or 3 months. President Trump has delivered quite a few shocks to India-US relations, and the relationship is still in the process of recovering from all this. So some people have argued that this is more an expression of President Trump's personality. Essentially, he didn't feel happy with the way India approached him in comparison, for example, to Pakistan. But some other scholars have explained what has happened in the last months with more structural factors. For example, some people have argued that the United States has been progressively unhappy with Indian policy for years. For example, a very prominent scholar, Ashley Tellis, has argued that the United States has placed a bad bet on India. So there are these two schools of thought. But this is kind of more the academic discussion. On a more policy level, I mean, of course, we have to think about what will happen with the potential trade deal between the United States and India. They're still in the process of negotiating. And then, of course, how serious the damage to the relationship is and where do we go forward from here? Can the relationship be salvaged? For example, can cooperation within the Quad be continued in the same way as it used to be? So all these are very important questions, and we are very fortunate to have Harsh to help us deal with these important questions and kind of come to terms with a very complex situation. So Harsh, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here. Thank you, ISAS, Ivan, for organizing this on a short notice. It's always good to come to NUS and ISAS and engage. I've been doing that for a while with individuals and institutionally as well. We have had partnership both at ORF and at King's in different ways. Engaging and I think having a platform where one can discuss South Asia, India is always is still a rarity, so having this institution certainly does allow us, those who study the region, an interesting and important platform, and it's always wonderful to come here. Deciphering Mr. Trump is very difficult, and getting a sense of what he's doing, why he's doing, is always very difficult. But I think the way one can look at the India-US relationship and the role of Mr. Trump as a student of international relations, one can look at what is, as I think Ivan mentioned, what is actually driving this shift. There are several explanations, but I think if you think about it and look at the difference between Trump 1.0 and Trump 2.0, a lot of the dissonance starts from there, because if you go back to say December, January, when Mr. Trump got elected, there was a fair degree of optimism in India. India was perhaps amongst America's partners, one of the most optimistic countries that Mr. Trump would be good for the relationship, given his track record in Trump during his first term, and how, despite the challenges in the first half of first term, then in the second half things got repaired, and the relationship developed where both the political establishment in India as well as the institutional and bureaucratic establishment in India thought that they have a hang of both the man and the party that he was constructing in his own image. And I think that that resulted in a sense of a bit of irrational exuberance from India during the early Trump 2.0. And gradually, as the Trump administration in its second term started unveiling its policy response, it became clear that the challenges are going to mount. And one of the ways in which Indian establishment tried to deal with it was that Mr. Modi made an early visit, and the argument was that let's frame the relationship around certain issues which perhaps can then lead to greater predictability and stability in the relationship. It did, and if you read the joint statement that came out from Trump, Mr. Modi's visit in February, it's quite an extensive joint statement, and very clearly it lays out the roadmap for the relationship, which more or less, if you think about it, it is being followed. If you see what is happening in the space sector, defense sector, bureaucratic engagement, that is all is happening. But I think the big ticket item, which is the trade deal, that has gotten derailed, and because it has gotten derailed, the argument and the back and forth between Mr. Trump and India has become a bit more off the rails, has gone off the rails much more than perhaps people expected. Now, if you think about what has driven this relationship, U.S.-India relationship over the last several decades, a simple levels of analysis approach would lead you to argue that, look, there are these structural variables that has been in some ways the driver of this very important relationship. And that structural reality of India and the US converging on fundamental balance of power issues has led to a certain momentum in the relationship, which, despite changes in governments on both sides and changes in personalities on both sides, has not been able to derail. And that is a story, I think, that students of India-US relationship tell. That if you go to end of the Cold War, fundamental structural transformation in the international system, and then gradually America's attempt to look at India largely through the prism of larger balance of power in Asia than simply a South Asian balance, that started changing the dynamic. And you go back as back as George W. Bush administration, when the first time this argument was made by Condoleezza Rice, even before elections, when she wrote an article in Foreign Affairs. And I think that the transformation that started from there continued irrespective of the political complexion of the governments and leadership. And I think, therefore, if you're thinking of what actually was driving it, structural realities have been dominant, and they have been able to, in some cases, even transcend the domestic politics and domestic dissonance in the system. So, the US-India nuclear deal that came, and then after that, there was a lot of discontent, and Ivan was mentioning Ashley Tellis's argument that, look, there was a lot. I don't think that that's quite correct in that sense. What Mr. Tellis has said, if you take Obama, Trump, Biden administrations, three very, very different administrations with very different political ideologies, with very different leadership styles of three different presidents. And if you look at India, where you had Manmohan Singh and then Prime Minister Modi, both of them, on both sides, there was an equilibrium that this relationship structurally is so important that despite the dissonance that was there, the sense of disappointment that there's always been a question of how far India would go in supporting American agenda in Washington. There has always been question in Delhi how far India would go, how far America would go in supporting India's ambitions. Those questions never disappeared. But despite that fundamental, despite that underlying dissonance, the structural factors overwhelmingly took the relationship in a certain direction, which was largely that it went up and up. So you had Manmohan Singh, he ended up risking his own prime ministership for the nuclear deal. And then when Prime Minister Modi comes from the very beginning, and this was an argument that many people had made when he was elected, that look, here is a prime minister who was denied a visa by the Americans. He's going to be very harsh on the US and this and that. Nothing of that kind happened. In fact, in the first few months of his government after coming to power in 2014, he goes to the US, delivers a major speech in the US Congress, arguing that hesitations of history are over, very famous phrasing of how he wanted to look at the relationship, and therefore, and signs a number of the foundational defense agreements that had been lying in limbo under the previous government. So the trajectory has actually been very, very positively and driven by this realization on both sides that this is far too important a relationship because of balance of power structural reasons to be derailed by issue-based disalignment. So and there were always issues around which there was no alignment between India and the US. I mean, India, the expectation that India would somehow become an alliance partner, that how far India would go in supporting American interests in the region, in Asia, had always been there. But India had always argued that alliance was out of the question, that there are certain limits to which will define its own defense convergence with the US. So that trajectory was there, it was firmly established. And when you had Trump, under every administration, especially when they began, there was always there used to be this debate in India. When Mr. Trump came, there was this big question of first Trump came, that there was, this is very disruptive, whether he will disrupt the relationship. By the end of Trump 1.0, it was largely established relationship. There was the personal equation between Mr. Modi, and there was all Howdy Modi and all of those rallies and etc. So the relationship had been very, very significantly been salvaged from where Mr. Trump perhaps could have taken it. And the fact that Mr. Trump's role in sharpening the edge of the China conversation in the West, that also became very central to how many in India viewed, because Mr. Trump single-handedly changed the conversation on China in the West in his first term. And that meant that India-US relationship, if you're looking at it from a structural perspective, only benefited from it. And Biden administration continued with that argument. So when Biden came, there was again a lot of challenge for India, particularly for the Modi government, because there was a lot of concern that perhaps Biden administration would focus too much on human rights issues, domestic political issues, and nothing. Again, if you see the trajectory, nothing of that kind happened. Again, the structural factors overwhelmingly dictated the agenda of the Biden administration. If you're looking from Trump 2.0's perspective, it was a very, very solid relationship. And you also had the dissonance during Biden on Ukraine, which was again fundamental rift, that what is India doing with regard to Ukraine, and how America wanted India to behave. And India stuck to its stand that it will not support the West openly, and it will continue to take a position between Russia and Ukraine, which is going to be defined by India's agenda. It will continue to buy Russian oil and energy. So on many in many respects, those challenges continued, and many challenges came and they continued to shape the relationship, but they did not become deterministic in defining the trajectory. And I think that is where, if you are thinking of it from a structural perspective, you can make an argument that this was largely being defined and driven by structural agenda of India and the US. Now, what has happened under Trump 2.0? And I think that's where the debate becomes slightly more interesting, because it is not that the structural issues have disappeared. See, whenever you have a challenge that Mr. Trump is facing, when he talks, he has talked very little about Indo-Pacific. He has talked largely in bilateral terms. He talks about China, he talks about India, he talks about Russia, he talks about Europe. He doesn't talk about the strategic geography like Indo-Pacific, which has allowed India and the US convergence to emerge in a very radical manner. So in some ways, that structural reality is increasingly going down in salience. And where he's bringing his transactional element to the fore is very clear by when he brings up the trade issue, when he links it up to bilateral issues like Russia, Iran, when he links it up to H-1B visas. What is driving that? A large part of what is driving that, of course, is the kind of domestic politics that he's pursuing, that his base needs certain kinds of actions from him. And at times, India becomes a salient actor in that debate. A role that China played in his first term, India is increasingly playing in his second term, because in some ways, generating new jobs is difficult. But saying that I'm taking away H-1B visas from Indians is something that provides him much greater positive energy with his base than saying that, look, I'm going to generate so many jobs, which any political leader finds very difficult to do in a short period in time. So I think in some ways the short-term calculations of his own political base, his own political reality is driving this initial turbulence. And it was not helped that the trade deal that India and the US were very close to signing before the India-Pakistan crisis happened. Actually, whatever we have heard and whatever we know about the deal, actually India had gone quite significantly ahead in terms of market access, even on agriculture. So it's not that Indian policymakers were not aware of the kind of concessions they would have to make for Mr. Trump. But in some ways, what really came in between was, by the time that deal was about to be signed, you had Operation Sindoor and Pahalgam, and there another aspect of the relationship came to the fore, which was that Pakistan, and there you find that the individual element comes to the fore, that his own personality becomes much more defined by how he believes he ended the war, and India, for deterrence reasons, could not do what perhaps a Pakistan could do. For Pakistan, the calculus was exactly the opposite. They reverted back to the pre-2014 phase, where Pakistan always would bring in international support to frame its response towards India in any crisis. So you had the deterrence framework for Pakistan relies on external intervention. For India, it's exactly the opposite. And from 2014, what the Modi government had been trying to do with Pakistan was to build an escalation ladder in deterrence. And therefore, it is very difficult for any government in India today to give credit to the US, because that dilutes that whole argument as to how far India has been able to map its deterrence posture vis-a-vis Pakistan. And I think that, because of that, and because Trump in some ways felt, or seems to have felt, that, look, it's India's, from India the response has been so negative, despite me, according to him, playing the central role in bringing this crisis to an end, and India, for its own reasons, deciding, of course, there is a political element in India as well, but I think for India's reason for not identifying Mr. Trump as a central character, and this has more to do with the deterrence framework that India is trying to build vis-a-vis Pakistan. And I think that complication that emerged after that further derailed the process. So if you are thinking analytically, you are looking at two distinct variables, two distinct levels, both at the individual level and the domestic political level, which is now much more in the driver's seat than perhaps they have ever been. Which means that the structural argument it's very difficult to filter through that structural argument in the American system. That was very easy to do till a few years back, or even till last year. And now, because the way politics in the US is being framed, because of the way Mr. Trump's own personal ambitions are being framed in the American domestic politics, this is creating a dissonance which is far larger than one had anticipated when he had come to power. So I think larger issue which I would posit is that India-US relationship, which had seen an equilibrium post end of the Cold War, because of the dominance of structural factors, suddenly finds itself devoid of that structural push, and is now being pulled by the domestic political and the individual level variables, which the structure is finding it difficult to overwhelm, and therefore this dissonance is likely to continue till such time as particularly as the trade deal does not come to fruition. Because until such time, the levers that Mr. Trump will use will continue to generate negative resonance in India. And I think the challenge for India-US relationship going forward, and the Trump factor that perhaps will also end up defining the medium-term trajectory of this relationship, is that what India-US relationship and its success had done in the last 3 decades is to marginalize those voices who always complained about the US. That is America a reliable partner? And the answer was that yes, America has been doing certain things with India, which are now making that argument less and less salient. That given the centrality of America in India's foreign policy posture, in India's strategic posture, and given how far American establishment was willing to go, whether it was on Pakistan, whether it was on terrorism, whether it was on China, whether it was on access to technology, all the critical factors that at one point in time India believed were used against it. After the end of the Cold War, gradually over the last 3 decades, we had seen all those barriers being removed. And therefore, the case could have been made that, look, America, despite its challenges, is really building a partnership with India which has its legs to stand. I think what Mr. Trump has done is to revive the Cold Warriors in the Indian system. So the damage that is happening, and the longer this continues, the damage this will do to India-US relationship is not that the structural variables will not come back. Eventually, at least I am a great believer in structural realities. They will come back, and they will assert themselves, and India and US relationship will come back to its normal equilibrium. But the domestic landscape would have shifted, and you will have it would become much more difficult for future political leaders in India to make the kind of moves that whether it was Mr. Vajpayee, Dr. Manmohan Singh, or Mr. Modi, they have made vis-a-vis the US. That space has shrunk for political leaders. And I think the political damage that Mr. Trump has done, and the way that has shrunk the space for Indian leadership, that creates its own set of problems for India-US relationship in the future. And that, I think, is going to be the legacy of Mr. Trump, if you think about where Mr. Trump has positioned himself and the relationship. He keeps on saying Mr. Modi is a good friend, which there is no reason to believe that they are not friends. But that friendship is being used in transactional terms to tell the world that, look, if I tell Prime Minister Modi to reduce, even last, I think yesterday he has said this, that look, I have told Mr. Modi and he's reducing the energy supplies from Russia. Now, that's I don't think that's likely to happen given the political economy of India, unless there are alternative sources and cheaper sources available. It's not entirely evident that India is going to reduce its reliance on Russian energy. But the reality is that one has to, in some ways that India is navigating is a Trump administration that is doing diplomacy through the megaphone, which is doing public diplomacy through social media, making it difficult for Indian policymakers to make those concessions which perhaps they want. So if you think about the trade deal, where India was giving certain kinds of concessions before, it now becomes much more difficult for the same political leadership to give those concessions publicly, because there is a lot of pressure, and there is a lot of disappointment in India when, for example, Operation Sindoor came to a halt, because a lot of the people blamed they thought that this was under American pressure, which my understanding is that it was not. But the perception that Trump was able to create was that it was he who pressurized Indian policymakers to conclude the conflict. And that meant that many in India believed that India should have continued. and India should have pushed Pakistan further. But the reality, of course, is much more complicated, and the damage that has happened because of that is that the ability of Indian policymakers to grant certain kinds of concessions to the US, that ability has further shrunk. So the damage is twofold. One, in the short to medium term, all those arrangements that India and the US would have done without this, India will find it very difficult to now assert its to give those concessions to the US. And in the long term, those who always argued that America is not a very reliable partner have got an upper hand now. The argument would start. So if you are thinking of buying American defense technology, the question would always come: why? What happens if tomorrow America starts behaving the way it is doing? So again, all those factors that at one point were driving this relationship, that India is a big defense buyer and therefore it's going to buy defense technology. The first thing that Mr. Trump said when he came to office and when he was talking about India is going to buy big ticket items from the US. But now the position is that it is exactly the opposite, because the domestic political landscape in India has changed, and it has changed because of the way Mr. Trump has conducted his diplomacy. So broadly, I think what I want to make 2 points to conclude. One is that this push and pull factors between structure and other realities, that I think has been inverted. So what was driving, what the structural realities that were driving this relationship are now no longer in the dominant position insofar as the political discourse between the two sides is concerned. And B, that while there won't be any immediate damage to the relationship, fundamental damage to the relationship for policymakers in India and the US, it has become much more difficult to craft or to carve a relationship that perhaps could sustain the kind of momentum that was there in the relationship before. And both of these, I think, aspects do not bode particularly well for India-US relationship, which was doing well, which had much going for it despite the challenges. But I think now, as we assess it under Mr. Trump and under the second administration, and as we look for the future of this relationship, I think the turbulence is going to be more and increasingly visible, publicly visible. In the past, in the recent past, there was turbulence, but it was not visible. So even when we were talking about Ukraine and how Biden administration and Modi government did not get along on Ukraine, but it was not publicly visible that there was a real dissonance. Both could come to an understanding. Both could make their case to each other behind closed doors. That kind of diplomacy does not seem to be really very likely in the short to medium term. So I'll just end there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Harsh. This was a real tour de force of the relationship. A lot of questions, but I will use my privilege as the moderator to ask two, and then I'll open the floor. My first question concerns the domestic US debate on India. It seems that President Trump has shifted very much this debate in a much more negative direction, because historically, until very recently, it was extremely positive. And how permanent do you think this shift is? Because some would argue that this is just a temporary thing that will go in 3-4 years. Some of it driven by his own anti-immigration policy and his kind of personality and a lot of other factors. But one can argue that in domestic US politics, there are factors which drive a very positive relationship toward India. For example, the Indian American community. That's one question. And my second question concerns the structural factors, which I believe primarily refer to China. Of course, there are others, but especially China. So how fast and in what way do you think they can reassert themselves? Because I can imagine, for example, Xi Jinping and President Trump falling off very easily over trade or over kind of various issues in Asia, and very soon these kind of structural factors might start to reimpose themselves, which immediately will kind of raise India's profile in American strategy, even if President Trump doesn't personally get invested in this, because there are some key members of his administration who are actually much more favorable toward a kind of China containment strategy, to put it very simply. So what do you think of these two issues?
So I think I'll just speak about the structural factors first. India-US relationship in the last few months has, as we have been discussing, is all about Trump's and how Trump is he makes he has generated a lot of turbulence in the relationship, and I've just given you a sense of what I think is happening. But what I think the there is also another reality, which is that India-US relationship over the last three decades has also become so institutionalized that irrespective of what Mr. Trump is doing, there's so much happening. So that bureaucracies are still meeting regularly because that's what they are mandated to do. Just a few weeks back, ISRO and NASA, one of their most sophisticated satellites was launched. One of the biggest collaborations India has done in space in recent years. So it's not that things are not happening at multiple levels. And it's not that things will not happen. And I think they are primarily driven both by this dynamic of, these two countries have to work together to ensure certain kinds of outcomes in certain specific sectors, but also the way institutionalization of this relationship has happened over time, which allows you to continue to provide certain kind of momentum to the structural factors, that if you have to work together on space, and if your space agencies are working together, they would want to produce a certain kind of an outcome, right? So I think in some ways the overwhelming narrative about Trump also hides a lot of what is actually also happening in the relationship. But because you have Mr. Trump, and because he's the president and he speaks about it all the time, he's in the media, he's shaping the trajectory of the discourse. What it also means is that a lot of what he says will also gradually start shaping the bureaucracies. So what is happening today is a reflection of what had happened in the past. But what may happen in the future would reflect what is happening in the present. So in a sense, how far bureaucracies absorb this and how far they take it on board will, as you point out, will also be a function of how the US-China relationship evolves. And I think that is another, there is another layer of uncertainty there, because we have not yet seen any cogent, cohesive argument. See, even in his first term, he came to a China consensus relatively late in his term. So, I mean, we are still talking about 10 months in office, right? So it looks as if he has been in office for a very long time. But I think the China question is certainly central, and in some ways would also determine a lot of the responses of other players, because everyone is at this point waiting to see whether it is on supply chains, whether it is on defense, whether it is on security. I think everyone is waiting and watching and seeing how this plays out. But I think what China does and how China plays this, and therefore you have the India-China rapprochement that is building up, that has started becoming a reality. Many would argue that, look, this is also because of Trump, although the movement started happening much before Trump, and the two sides were trying to come to terms with each other even before Trump was in office. But so I think the China factor remains very, very crucial, and China factor will determine in some ways the trajectory of the relationship, and therefore we wait and watch and see how the great Mr. Trump and Xi Jinping meeting, what transpires there. The domestic debate in India on the US, I think it depends on. So let's assume that by early next year there is a trade agreement between India and the US. Now, if that happens, then we would know that, that certain issues would not be talked about because those issues would have been settled. And then you can imagine, let's also say that, let's also imagine that on the other hand, Mr. Trump has realized that he can't get along with Xi Jinping and there is no grand bargain there, right? Now, if that is the outcome and he shifts and he starts investing in the way in certain partnerships, like the way he did in Trump 1.0, then a lot of the noise that is visible will certainly die down. But that question that he has raised and that people have raised will continue to echo. That, look, a lot of the in India, the argument since the end of the Cold War was that, look, we don't want to be an alliance partner of any country, but we want to. We are very close to the US. I think that the way India's strategic posture was evolving, it was very clear that the two sides, there was a fundamental convergence between the two sides, that the two sides were willing to work towards. And the fact that America was shifting its ground on key issues, transfer of technology, Pakistan, those debates had shifted. Now those debates, if they come back to the center, right? Pakistan, for example, is certainly something that has come back. For the last 2 decades at least, it was marginal. It was there, and there were people who had always argued in the Indian policy establishment that there is. Pakistan and America have far too close a relationship because of their history, that it had to be taken seriously. But gradually, as the relationship had unfolded, it had marginalized Pakistan. In India had also was successful in ensuring that the larger issue of China became the defining theme of the relationship. Now, of course, if you have all these questions come back, then those who who would say that how far should Indian policymakers go to invest in the US, invest in this relationship, from buying defense equipment to aligning trading requirements to working in the Quad to working in other various platforms. Some of it India will have to do because of its own interests. But I think the question would be that why should India compromise certain things? For example, the relationship with Russia. I mean, that question had been hanging now for a very long time. It's not that India has been curtailing its ties with Russia because of America, but the fundamental economic base of India-Russia relationship had been very, very weak. So now the question would be that should India at all be thinking along those lines, and that argument would become more potent, that India should not really be hitching its wagon to the US, because this can be very, very complicated, and if India were not multi-aligned, or if India did not have the strategic space to maneuver, then under Trump 2.0, a lot of it would have been very, very difficult to navigate, as some of America's closest allies are finding. South Koreans, the way South Korean president's visit was treated was quite remarkable. He was in the US, he signed a very good deal. By the time he's flying, South Koreans are being apprehended in India, and by the time he lands, things have changed completely for him. So in a sense, if this can happen to one of the closest allies of the US, then we are just a strategic partner. So I think those questions certainly would become more potent in India's domestic politics. So now, if by the end of Trump 2.0, over the next 3 years, we see a remarkably changed Mr. Trump, and things have really gone in a very positive direction, then I think we'll be having a very different conversation. But I doubt very much whether the voices, even during the best of the times in India-US relationship, you always have people who have questioned this relationship. So you can imagine that now, when there is some turbulence in the relationship, that those voices will be taken more seriously than they were in the past.
Oh, thank you, Harsh, for a very thorough and kind of deep answer to my questions. So let me now open the floor for questions. So please raise your hands. And should we get several questions, or would you prefer to answer them one by
doesn't
one?
have to be questions. People can.
Or comments, yeah, or outbursts, or whatever you want. So please, the floor is open, sir.
Myself, JP Jaswant. Thank you very much for very.
Sorry, just wait for the microphone, please.
Good morning, everyone. JP Jaswal here. Thank you very much for very insightful talk on this relationship, which is, of course, is a hot button for everyone. I like the way you have, been very optimistic, because the 3 decades of structural positiveness, and it will carry on. And to that effect, just I think minutes I was driving and the news came. The Trump is saying that India will stop buying Russian oil. I mean, that's again, it's drifting towards the positive side you are looking at, and probably it will come to the trade deal sooner than later, with China factor playing. But in this whole structure and what is development has happened, how do you look at the play of US taking Pakistan into play against India, and probably the not buying Russian oil, I think will probably stabilize there, rather than it going towards pushing India to have a lesser relationship with Russia. So, do you think that will just stop there once the Indian lessen the buying oil or stop buying oil? Thank you.
Shall we go for another question? So, anybody having another question? Sir, please. If you can introduce yourself, please.
I'm Sunil Guliani. I heard Mr. Pant's analysis and the entire scenario, what is going on, with keen intent. It's very hard to trust Mr. Trump. And he likes to quote things which probably have never happened. I do not believe that Modi has promised him that he will buy less Russian oil. So this is his style, to muddy the waters in whatever way he can. It happened with the India-Pak war. Now it is about this oil. He would say, Modi is my friend and he's a great man. And then he'll invite Shahbaz Sharif to address this. So it's just not possible to trust him. There is no scope to develop any trust between India and US so long as Trump is there. That's my view. Thank you.
So, because this was more of a comment than a question, another question?
Mr. Pant will react to it.
Of course. So, Sandeep, please.
Thank you very much for that excellent talk. And always a pleasure to move beyond what is immediately happening and thinking about on structural level what is going on. I'm just building on what Ivan was also saying, and I think what you said is very persuasive. Just for argument's sake, if I could just think about if there is an alternate structural logic, or there is a shift in a structural logic, because one way perhaps to put it is that Bush and the whole thinking was that we need to build, or we should build India up as a regional leader, even if it chooses not to come with us, because it will in some way raise costs for China, build pressure on China, and actually be on lower cost for us, because we will not be assuming security of India in any way, or in any way giving any kind of commitment, right? And so there was a logic to it, and I think that thinking and building up India as, like, supporting India's rise as a regional leader has been the primary engine or a key engine of what has driven the relationship. But that was within a context of thinking about that we should not seek out direct confrontation with China. I think in the last 30 years, what has happened is that it has become much more confrontational, and there has been a much more bipolar thinking of what is going on. In that scenario, do you really need a third strategically autonomous actor playing out there, or there's because of the increased polarization, right? The ground for these kind of actors, the non-aligned actors, I mean, they can exist, but we don't need to any longer push them up as regional leaders, right? I mean, a similar kind of thinking went on in the early 1950s in US when they were like, okay, fine, India can be non-aligned if it wants, but we don't need to push India as a regional leader as they were thinking in late 40s. And this combined with the fact that even when the freeze happened after Galwan Valley, India did not come. And I think a lot of frustration that foreign affairs articles, the spate of foreign affairs articles came from, was that even at this point, at the lowest point of China-India relationship, you won't come with us. Then what's the point of this, right? So then this will never mature into something further than what it is. And so do you think that then there's a fundamental structural shift that, say, the national security statement that Biden had, which still said that India needs to be built up as a regional leader. Do you think that in Trump era, that will be taken off the document and then never put on back? I mean, is that maybe something that might be happening, a fundamental shift in structural logic? Thanks.
Thank you. I think very interesting points. I'll take the last one first. I think, see, the whole argument was, as you mentioned, the understanding was, and in fact, since we are talking of Ashley Tellis, he was the one who articulated it initially. So I find his latest piece slightly strikingly different, because he, when he started, when he was talking about the need for US-India nuclear deal at that point in time, he was the one who gave it an intellect. He made it intellectually plausible, and the argument was very simple. That look, rise of India, and so basically what was being told to the American policy establishment, and how American policy establishment started internalizing this was very simply that rise of India is good for the US irrespective of what India does. It may not align with you, it will not be an alliance partner, but a rising India will stabilize the system. It will be a stabilizing impact on the balance of power. And what you are saying, that if India itself stands its ground vis-a-vis China without your help, what better thing do you need? Because you are here supporting everyone, right? From Japanese to Australians to Koreans, and here is a country like India which will itself do it. So you don't actually need to worry about going to India's defense. So that became the intellectual framework that drove a lot of the policy agendas. So even Biden, for example, till Biden. Now, what fundamentally Mr. Trump's intellectual worldview is slightly different. His argument, see, there are two things. One, if there is any intellectual thread there, from Trump, even 1.0 was all about building America's domestic capabilities, right? We have fought enough wars, we have done enough for the world, let us look inwards, because now I want to provide employment, I want to build better infrastructure, I want to bring resources back, American resources back to the US. That is what has driven his argument. And therefore, even in the second term, one of the most intellectually interesting arguments had come from people like Elbridge Colby, right? What he says, what does he say? And he basically is arguing that countries should be doing more for their own defense. Our partners should be doing more for their defense. I mean, he talks of Japan should 8% GDP and Taiwan should be doing 10% of GDP, spend 10% of the GDP on defense. Now, even from that perspective, if you think about it, India is a natural partner. India is not asking America to come to its aid. India is not asking America to do anything for free. If you are buying weapons, India is saying we will pay you. I mean, that is sort of a net win-win in some ways. And the argument therefore becomes that, look, India in that context is a much better fit even in that framework. If you believe that you want to withdraw and you want to sort of retain power at home and don't want to do this extended deterrence model of balance of power, then what better partner than India? Now, the challenge here is that structural argument comes in contestation with the domestic base argument that MAGA is presenting, right? There is an element of racism, but in MAGA, the jobs are going to Indians, jobs, let's bring jobs back home, and all of that where the first term was all about China, this argument, became about China, that let's stop China getting technology, let's stop China from becoming a high-end tech power, because that's where in the second term, a lot of this is also coming to India. That India is gaining, a country like India is gaining, and because immigration is such an important issue for the base, India becomes an easy target. Now that, I think, in some ways is dominating the structural logic. If the structural logic comes into play, I don't think there is any intellectual problem there for Trump and for his supporters, and therefore there are many in Trump administration who are generally favorable to India. But when it comes down to the basic logic of immigration and trade, where this argument is that why are we giving so much to the Indians? That there's a huge trade deficit. I mean, again, economists will argue that there's a misunderstanding, but that's how politics is being redefining, right? So I think a lot of these arguments therefore become inward looking. And when that happens, when the domestic political argument becomes more salient, then you will always have a problem of how do you then continue to defend that structural argument. Now, and therefore, if you today make that argument that, look, India's partnership is so important for larger balance of power reasons, it does not have the same potency as it used to have, given the political context through which America is going through and Mr. Trump's own political realities. And that, my own sense is that in some ways would also it may also continue beyond Trump. It's not entirely evident to me that if tomorrow there is, because the political space is being defined by Trump, so the Democrats are becoming more Trumpian. If you have to fight and win elections, if you remove the extreme left from Democrats, the centrist Democrats are all talking similar language on immigration, on trade, and in fact Biden administration continued with a lot of what Mr. Trump said in his first term, right? So I think that political contestation on immigration, that political contestation on American domestic politics will be a major driver of India-US relationship, like other aspects of American foreign policy. And in that, India can potentially be a loser if the external environment does not then come back and start dominating. And I think that's where the argument comes, is how does China play this game? If China is smart, then it just have to be slightly more balanced in its external outreach. If it is not, which generally China has not been in the last few decades, then I think you can see a reversal, because then you can see the whole logic coming back, that look, China is pushing now and we have to push back, and therefore certain kinds of partnerships will be needed. So I don't think partnerships, the logic of partnership is going anywhere. It's just its salience within a certain context that determines a policy response. And I think that's where, as an analyst or an observer, I feel I should be looking at, or people should be looking at. I think trust and Trump. That's a fair point. I mean, I think it's very difficult to make a case that that there is going to be any long-term coherence or intellectual coherence to Mr. Trump's arguments, because I don't think there is any, and I don't think that's how he operates. The problem, and that's the point I was making earlier, that I think this question of trusting him would always be a big issue. But if it were simply an issue of trusting Trump, it would be very simple, because then you would wait him out. If it's a larger question that start percolating down in the Indian establishment, that can America be trusted, then we have a real problem, because then it's a long-term problem. If it's Mr. Trump, then we know that he's a certain kind of a leader. Such leaders come few and far between. He will be there for 4 years. We will somehow navigate it. I think most countries are trying to do that. India is not in any special category here. All the countries are. I mean, even America's closest partners don't know what to do with him. And I think if they have a problem, then India, which has certainly maintained, and some of the arguments that people like Mr. Tellis have made, that look, India should have been much more closer to the U.S. and therefore there has been this dissonance in the U.S. that what does India stand for and whether India will stick by America, that has resonated. But many in India would say that was perhaps a smart move, that India continued to be a slightly distinct from America, and therefore India could also say, as I was saying, that look, we can stand up to China even when Galwan happened. The only thing India asked from the Americans was intelligence. Other than that, Indian soldiers were facing Chinese soldiers. India did not ask anyone else to come and defend itself. And so, in that sense, India's approach to the US or its wider foreign policy may have not been way off the mark. Because if you see what the America's closest allies are now trying to do, they are talking the language that India has talking about, right? Strategic autonomy, multi-alignment, like-minded coalitions, partnerships. So they have realized that the kind of salience that a certain kind of a alliance relationship used to have at one point in time is no longer relevant in the age of Mr. Trump. So I think the trust factor is across the board. And India is no exception. Perhaps India in some ways, for India the issue would be that if this trust factor becomes more ingrained in the system, then how do we move forward with the US post-Trump? Because then you will have a number of people in India who would be saying that we have to be very cautious. And the issue is, in our assessment, can we manage our domestic development agenda and external environment issues without partnership with the US? I think that's the question India has to ask. Pakistan and I think Pakistan. Pakistan's use of the US at critical points in its history is very interesting, but I think it's also very. They have always been very successful with it in the short term. Long term, Pakistan is what it is, but they have been able to use their external partnerships and leverage them very effectively vis-a-vis India, because their sole agenda is India. So if you have to counter if you have a single-minded direction or goal, then it becomes easier to manipulate some of your partnerships. And I think they certainly have been on the mark when it comes to Mr. Trump. They know they have played him well. Nobel Prize nomination, critical minerals, port facility, everything they have put on the platter. And despite the fact that the Chinese are their closest partners, so they certainly have latched on to this idea that somehow reaching to Mr. Trump as a person and appealing to his personality was the way to go, and therefore during Sindoor they could shift the focus from the conflict in South Asia to Mr. Trump's personality. So this was they did effectively. But I think it is also important to remember that he reached out to Pakistan in his first term as well. There's a famous visit by Imran Khan where he even said, "I'm happy to intervene on Kashmir if you want me to. I'm happy to help you with Kashmir issue." And so he has. I don't think I don't think there is any assessment of why such things won't happen or what certain kind of damage that it would do in India. I don't think those assessments Mr. Trump makes, particularly when it comes to, I think, those issues where he doesn't know much about, which is he's certainly not interested in South Asia as such, so he's not going to invest his time. So whatever he feels is important for the camera at that particular point in time, he says that. And Pakistan has played him well, and I think you have to give them credit for that. Whether it gives them any long-term advantages, I don't know. Whether Americans are going to come and get critical minerals from Pakistan are able to succeed. I mean, that is for China. Yes, so Americans are way off. It's much more difficult. So so I don't think that Pakistan is going to be a sustaining factor in India-US relationship, not India-Trump, but India-US, because whichever way you look at it, the advantages of Pakistan are fairly limited. It's a tactical, even Biden administration was investing in Pakistan for a limited set of reasons. So I don't think those reasons have changed. And the reasons for engaging India have changed, as we have been discussing. But I think, again, if you are operating where the level of analysis is individual, then I think Mr. Trump's and his own personality does play a role in how India and Pakistan, both India may not have benefited as much as Pakistan has, because they have been able to play to the personality factor.
Thank you, Har.
Sorry, on the Russian
Oh, yes.
relationship and oil purchase.
See, I don't think India would have said that we are going to reduce our dependence on Russia. I think it's simply the case of I think Indian political economy is far too fragile to go down that route. I think eventually what India certainly can do and what it could propose is that, look, eventually we are going to reduce our gradually reduce our dependence on Russia, and we are going to buy more energy from the US. I think that's a negotiating tactic India can use, and in fact under Trump 1.2, India was buying a lot of energy from the US because to satisfy Mr. Trump. So there are ways in which you can make that argument, and given that he's transactional, you have to be transactional. So you can certainly make a case. But I don't think at a time when India is looking at this turbulence, and India is also looking at global economy not doing particularly well, energy market being volatile, that a partner that is stable, that is and providing you relatively discounted rates, which Russians are no longer doing. You would want to annoy the Russians by publicly saying we are going to reduce. So I think gradually, certainly, that can be a negotiating strategy for India. India would have said behind closed doors that we are going to reduce our dependence on Russia and we are going to buy more from the US, but that is going to take over. But I think that's how he plays. Now he has played it. Now he's saying, now I'm going to talk to China about it.
Yeah. So just to add Mr. Gulani's point, the whole world has kind of, India's everybody has a mistrust upon this personality. Do you think it will mellow down soon? Because China, it has not buzzed. Russia, Putin has not buzzed. Nobody is listening to him now. The situation is like that. And vis-a-vis, when the tariff is getting affected, all the costs are going to rise eventually to US, which is certainly a big problem, though he may subsidize and all those things. So do you think it will accelerate the mellow-dining of him and getting to trade deals and also faster, or he will be like carrying on this kind of topsy-turvy and unreliable image?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's he is what he is. It's very difficult to change the essence of an individual. I don't think he's going to change in any way. His personality is like that. So he likes to make grandiose statements. He likes to play to the camera. I mean, that's what he is. So it's very difficult to see him mellowing down in that sense. I think he will continue this. I think where perhaps some reality check might happen is eventually if for example the American economy starts to falter, or you have the global environment where there is a real challenge for him to manage, because at this point in time there are certain things which he may feel. I mean, Gaza peace deal, right? He would say, "Oh, what a great thing I have done." So he also is getting vindicated in some ways in certain areas. He might feel that, look, this is a big victory for me. I said I would deliver, and he then latches on to small things. Cambodia, Thailand making a deal, so he says, this is a great achievement. Armenia, Azerbaijan, so this is a great achievement. So I do think that's how he is, and it's very difficult to change the basic personality of I don't think others can do it. I think something dramatic will have to shift within the American politics to mellow him down, if that's the term.
Mainly in relation to trade deals with China and India, the big players. I
I think that is already happening, because I think one of the reasons of him making a big show of India publicly has to do with the fact that I think initially he did believe that because I have such a special relationship with India, and because Modi was, Howdy Modi and all those things that we did, it would be easier to get a deal with the Indians. He did not realize that Indians are masters at not signing trade agreements. So we are here. So now that he did not get the deal, the frustration is building more and more, and that's why it's coming out publicly. And then he started linking those things. Russia was linked, Iran was linked, H1B. So everything is together. And I think if you think of it as a basket, then it becomes more bigger problem.
Oh, because we're starting to run out of time, let me ask you for a last round of questions. So 2 questions here. Please make them as brief as possible.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, is the overture from China, you think it's opportunistic or is it genuine
To India.
to India?
Sir, please.
Yeah, just wondering, if you were the new foreign minister of India, what key message would you convey to the US or China? Thank you.
Last
I
question.
don't want to be in that position today, at least not today.
Mr. Taneja? Dr. Taneja.
Hirschman, I think you've already elaborated on the Pakistan factor. But, we saw something very unusual, that the head of the Pakistan military, Asim Munir, being invited to the White House for a lunch with the president. Very unusual, because even NATO commanders don't get invited to the White House for a lunch. And I've read people argue that India perhaps underestimated Pakistan military's connections with the American military, because they obviously have a long history of military cooperation. And the fact that you have a Secretary of War now, I think he's called Pete Hegseth, who's a very lightweight, even though he's served in the military, but he is considered to be a very lightweight, defense secretary. That the Pakistanis took advantage of weak leadership at the top in the Pentagon, and they leveraged some of their connections, plus the combination of the lobbying firm they hired, which worked very closely with the Trump family. So do you think India actually underestimated Pakistan's ability to play these sort of games? And I agree with you that this perhaps is nothing long-term. This is a temporary advantage that Pakistan has gained in building this narrative. But do you think overall India underestimated this?
So we have about 5-6 minutes for all these questions.
No, I do think that I'll go in the reverse order. I do think that if you look at the strategic communication post Operation Sindoor, India was nowhere. I mean, Pakistan, despite having a weak hand, played their hand pretty effectively, and India's argument was getting lost somewhere. So I do think that they have been very effective. But this is again this is not something new. Pakistani lobbying, Pakistani networking in world capitals is legendary. From London to Western capitals to Washington, and I think one of the pet peeves from India has always been that you have the Western capitals talk of democracy, but they continue to fet the army chiefs of Pakistan. So I think it continues in that tradition, where certainly perhaps an underestimation would have happened was that, look, if you believe that you have defeated them on the battlefield, then you don't really need to do the kind of lobbying or the kind of outreach that you should be doing. But I think it turned out that it was exactly the opposite that needed to have happened. I think the challenge for India remains that the matrix of deterrence. How do you ensure that because for India the message is also to Pakistan, and the message to Pakistan since 2014 under this government at least has been that we will climb the escalation ladder, and we will do it without bothering about the world, because that was exactly the other opposite consideration that Pakistanis had, that you do a terror attack and then you wait for the world to come in and tell India not to respond. Now India started since 2014 inverting the arrangement, and I think that's where the real pressure for India lies, is how do you then shape your response to Pakistan, but at the same time also don't allow other actors to come in. Whereas for Pakistan, it's much easier in that sense to reach out to Washington, to London, to Brussels, and say that look, we need your help, and we want India to be contained, etc. But of course, the most important aspect here is the Nobel nomination for Mr. Trump, and they were it was apparently a few minutes late, and then the nominations had closed, but nonetheless the nomination was done. I think if I am the foreign minister, I would just, I think, I see, just on a lighter note, I think people are saying a lot of things, but who is listening is also the point, right? Someone has to listen to what I say, and then and Mr. Trump has to listen to me for me to. But I think the larger point that India or Indian policymakers or anyone who understands the pulse and pressures of Indian foreign policy whether they are today or a few years down the line, is that there is no getting away from this reality that India and America will have to partner with each other. And and it is not, as I was saying earlier, it is not that it is all about India, that India's needs. Of course, India is a smaller country relatively, and India's needs will dictate, its interests are going to dictate a partnership. But it is also the unique proposition that India makes to the US, that look, the fact that we don't want to be an alliance partner to the US is actually good news for the US. Because America has a number of alliance partners, and all of them are today seen as problem, because they are too dependent. So what is America saying? Let loose, you spend more, you do this. India is saying, no, we don't want you as an alliance partner. We are capable of tackling our challenges. What we need is a supporting international environment from you. What we need is certain kinds of for our development, we need your support. For our capacity building, we need your support. It's not that we want your soldiers to fight our battles. And I think that's a difference. And that difference can be exploited by Indian policymakers much more effectively, because I think that's the proposition at this particular point in time, which is going to cut through, the American political system, rather than talking about a win-win trade deal, and because that in any case will happen. But I think what India is offering is a unique argument that no other American partner, very few American partners can offer, and of course the scale of India. That if you believe that the balance of power is going to be of future is going to be decided in the Indo-Pacific, then India has to be a central component of your strategy. So therefore, there is no getting away from the India question, and that I would hopefully that someone would listen to that argument. I think China overture. I think China has been, and India and China have been engaging with each other, trying to lower the temperature much before Mr. Trump came to office. But I think the Chinese did factor in that, that if Mr. Trump comes to office, then the pressures may rise. And there, I think some degree of sanity on the border with India was important. India's proposition was throughout post Galwan was relatively simple, that look, you change the status quo, now you have to decide whether you want to go to status quo ante or not. If you go to status quo ante, things would revert back from our side, because that's the only thing that India said. I think after having Chinese forces, after mobilizing Chinese forces for close to 4.5 years, the realization on China's part was also that, that this was, what have we achieved apart from making a point? There was no great achievement, strategic or tactical. And I think withdrawing or moving back from those forward positions gives them some space with India, which might allow them to generate some momentum on economic matters. So, whereas India's side was also under pressure for economic reasons, I think Chinese were also under pressure to a certain limited extent, and I think that's what brought them towards this understanding, and that is, again, a tactical understanding. It is not a strategic alignment of any kind. But I think this has the potential, particularly at this point when America is doing what it is doing, to perhaps be longer lasting than initially one would have expected, given the circumstances.
Well, thank you so much, Harsh, for this impressive talk and impressive Q&A. And please join me in a vote of thanks. Thank you.